All right, guys, it is time for my second iteration in this series that I'm calling Advanced Tactics, where I look at each of the Grimdark Future battle uh, uh, armies in Grimdark Future, and I sort of dig into them in depth, talk about what I think needs to be done to the army, if anything. And so the second one, the first one was Alien Hives, which I think was pretty straightforward, I think, to talk about. Battle Brothers, this is an army that I've struggled to sort of how do I break up? Because when we talk about Battle Brothers, we're talking about all the sub factions as well. And I went back and forth several times about whether do I want to combine all the Battle Brothers into one single advanced tactics episode. I ended up deciding that I really feel that each of the Battle Brothers sub factions need their own sort of their own episode, if you will. So, but before we get into that, just remember to like and subscribe for the channel. It's going to help out. Let me know here on comments, especially on this particular series here. I want to sort of start off by saying this is based off my original tier list series where I put Battle Brothers as a whole, but also I think this specific Battle Brothers as a B tier. And it's funny when I think about B tier army, I consider when I talk about when I say vanilla basic Battle Brothers, I can't help but say that they feel bland. They feel like they're an army that hasn't really had a lot of detail put into them. I think that some of the other sub factions have had that detail put into them, but Battle Brothers not quite so. And I'll get into that as well. So I just want to go into my assumptions that I've covered for my tier list. I'm just going to reiterate them that I am talking about competing against the official armories only. I'm generally talking about competing within some sort of format of a 6-5 or 6 game GT, about 3,000 points and no allies as well. So that's an important thing that this series, I'll sort of reiterate, is about competitive play. I think OPR is Grimdark's a really fun game. I had a really great time playing this past weekend where I played two armies of sort of similar power levels, similar tiers, and had a great time in just a casual game. But I'm make sure that people watching this, if you aren't really into the competitive side and the really detailed balance, this series, Advanced Tactics, just may not be for you. So just sort of keep that in mind. This is the criteria I covered for my tier list. I'll run over it again, right? Flexibility, raw efficiency. I think armies that have the best don't have a lot of pissed at one hybrid taxes, a good spell list, impactful elites, cheap chaff, the multiple meaningful upgrades, I think, is a great thing to compare armies to. I always look at Caster 3 and Advanced Tactics as two particularly powerful upgrades. Access to Scout and Ambush, access to AP4, which I think is a pretty powerful thing in the meta, and Undead as well. So with the criteria, let's see how Battle Brothers match up to this criteria. And they feel like a B tier army, right? They're not very flexible, especially on the competitive side. I'll cover a particular competitive army that I built. Not very competitive as far as flexibility goes. They aren't very efficient, right? A lot of their units there's a lot of pistol and hybrid taxes in this army, makes a lot of the units not very efficient. They do have a good spell list, which I think one in particular, the level 3 time passage spell, I think is great. They do have some good impactful elites. They've got the quality 3 mainly. Not good chaff. Their best chaff is sort of that quality 4 chaff that I'll get into. A little expensive. They do have some good upgrades though, especially the Caster 3 and Advanced Tactics are two good upgrades for them, especially with a very good level 3 buff spell of time passage. They got some access to Scout and Ambush. Their AP4, they have access to it, but it's very clunky. And of course, they're not undead. So this is sort of the criteria that we're going to judge against here. So when we get into Battle Brothers, this is what I'm going to cover in this episode. One, I'm going to talk about a standard competitive list. Um, that is going to be a list that I think for Battle Brothers that if you bring it to a tournament, it's going to do pretty well. But after that, I'm taking this particular episode, and just so you know, each of these advanced tactics episodes are going to be different. They're going to sort of be what I feel is going to get the army to a good competitive spot. So in this particular one, I do have a redesign in mind. And for me, I think it's Battle Brothers in particular need a redesign. Two reasons. One, they need some access to AP4. They also just need to be more distinct from the other Battle Brothers faction. They need some more efficient units. I think when it comes to competition, when you really start talking about high level play and competitive armies, you need your units to be more efficient. And the other thing I think is um, very important. It's not directly tied to the competitive play, but I think it's vitally important that the basic Battle Brothers, which we know is translated to Space Marines, we need to expand the army and the units in the OPR army to sort of incorporate the modern roster. When you look at the one-page rule Battle Brothers army list, it feels like a Space Marine army list of like maybe 15, 20 years ago. The truth is that regular vanilla Space Marines, GW Games Workshop has expanded the line from 40K to include some really great models, to include some additional flexibility in the army. And I think I always say, whenever we are talking about one-page rules and the competitive side of one-page rules, part of that is also making the competitive side be attractive to 40K players. And you 40K players, they have these newer models. They have these models that they want to use in the game, and they don't want to create so they need a place for these models. So that's the other part of this redesign. It's going to look in four different areas, and one of which is that expansion to incorporate this modern roster. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to look at, though, is we're going to look at what I'd consider to be a competitive 3,000 point Battle Brothers army list. And I think that the first thing you're going to notice in this army is that it is pretty bland. It only contains a few units, really, that I've basically cherry picked the few very the competitive armies, units in his army, and I've built an army out of it. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't build different versions and include a couple of different models. I just picked one that I think is particularly competitive. Um, and this is what when I'm showing you this army, this is where I always want to show you a B tier army. A B tier army really it can play competitively, but it's so limited because so few of its models sort of reach that real raw efficiency and sort of giving it the tools it needs. So with that in mind, we're going to get into the army. It's basically a Master Destroyer and a Master Brother. They both have energy claws. Both of them are caster threes. And the idea is that both of them are going to be trying to cast the time passage, right? The army sort of hinges on this level 3 spell. It's why I'm running 6 spell tokens in this army. It all sort of hinges on this level 3 time passage to get +2 AP because, Battle Brothers don't have access to a very efficient way of getting AP4 in their army. And we're going to talk about, why that is and how it's difficult to actually get Power Fist on destroyers without bringing them with storm rifles. So we'll talk about that as well in the redesign. But that's what I have. That's how the army works. 6 caster tokens really meant, remember, the Master Destroyer was coming in from ambush, and he's going to have his 6. Master Destroyer is going to have his 3. We've also got 4 units of Pathfinders who are just bare bones. This is my chaff, right? I'll be using these Pathfinders as just chaff and blocking units. 2 10-man units of Battle Brothers. They've got medical training. I've got them with fusion rifles. So the army doesn't have a lot of AP4 in hand-to-hand, so it sort of makes up for that with a lot of AP4 in shooting with deadly, so it's got 2 fusion rifles. The big part, sort of the centerpiece of the army, and you don't have to use support brothers. You could use maybe a heavy artillery. I think support brothers are just a little more efficient, and that's running a combined unit of 6 support brothers with 6 last cannons. So the last cannon is the best heavy weapon, I think, with the relentless rule changes, right? You really need your support brothers to be standing still, and the missile launcher just has that 30-inch range, so they're able to be shot back. But with the 36-inch range from these last cannons, you really can sort of put your support brothers way in the back of the field and really benefit from that relentless. And that relentless is going to be really powerful, especially on deadly 3 weapons. So that's what I have with that army. The whole point of this army is to sort of basically the champ and the battle brothers were all meant to sort of, if you will, sort of huddle around the support brothers in case they get ambushed, and to basically stop the support brothers from being ambushed on, and just, get that value out of the support. So really, a lot of the army supports these support brothers, and then that have the two units of destroyers also with lightning claws. They're just coming in. They are sort of the maneuverable side of the army that are, they can ambush in wherever they want, take objectives, kill things, maybe kill enemy shooting. So this is how the army works. The army can be, if you wanted to, you could combine the Pathfinders to get less activations, or you could split up the Destroyers and Brothers into 5-man squads to have more activations. So there's a little bit of wiggle room with the army, but yeah, I think that this is a pretty good Battle Brother armies, but as you can kind of see, very limited model range and, very straightforward. Now, so again, this is the first part. Here you go. If you want to have a competitive Battle Brothers army, here you go. I want to spend a lot more time getting into what I would call a redesign. So this is a Battle Brothers unit redesigns that I've worked on here, and it's sort of hitting those points that I talked about here. There are some things, the way the Battle Brothers army was designed for OPR, it just makes things a little more difficult here. So I wanted to make them more competitive. I wanted to make the units more efficient. But the other thing I wanted to do as well is I wanted to give them a unique play style. I didn't want these to just be bland vanilla Battle Brothers. I wanted the Battle Brothers, this particular version, to sort of stand out from the other sub factions. Because if Battle Brothers, basic vanilla Battle Brothers, don't have access to their sort of special thing, there's really no reason not to just bring one of the sub factions to have a little more. And also just give this unit a little more flavor. So let's get into what I've done. So one, we're just going to go through the list here and we'll talk about. First of all, I did tweak the spells. Blurred Sight stayed the same. We've got a similar level 1 damage spell. I did change the level 2 to a rending on shoot. I think this is actually a very useful spell for them, giving them rending on shooting. Very nice to sort of add, especially because Battle Brothers don't have a lot of rending in the army. I tweaked the level 2 damage spell to be a deadly AP4 spell. That's always a really nice spell to add on. The other thing is I tweaked Time Passage. I think that Battle Brothers to me are very much about flexibility. So Time Passage is only on the charge. So actually I added this tweak to it, which is Heroic Might. It actually has a 6-inch range, which I think is, I don't like those 18-inch buffs. I think there's no counterplay to them. So I think Heroic Might is more powerful because it works whether you're charged or not, but also it's 6 inches. So you're sort of giving a little counterplay that your opponent could actually counter it. So I actually like this version as well, where it's a little more flexible, but also provides some counterplay, right? Where 6-inch range means your opponent actually can do a decent job of dispelling it. All right, so that's the spells. I think generally tweaks. Let's get into the actual changes. So this is where I think, and to be clear, my version does diverge from OPR a decent bit because one, I feel it needs to happen. So, but let's get into the Master Destroyer and the Master Brother. There's a few things that I did here that I think are important. One, I actually, if you're going to see here, the Master Brother, and I actually have a separate mage character. On a lot of my redesigns, I actually want this to happen, where a mage actually has their own upgrades, so they don't get access to all the upgrades of perhaps the destroyer like a power fist. They get access to things like resistance, and they get access to a second caster. So I think that's important to give the mage its own character slot, as well as giving it some specific protections like resistance. I think should go on mages, where they can't be maybe sniped as well. So I think I like this change where the mage destroyer and the mage, they have their own particular upgrade slots, own war gear, and they actually automatically come with a caster 2 that can be upgraded to 1 to caster 3 in addition to resistance. We'll get into the storm shotgun into a little bit, but let's go on from there. So, but for the destroyer, I wanted to make Battle Brothers unique. I wanted to give them a very clear advantage over their brethren. And one of the things that sort of jump out to me with Space Marines is flexibility. What could we really make in this army to make them more flexible. And one of the things that jumps out to me is actually instead of just giving their leaders, their Master Brother and Master Destroyer, one upgrade, we could actually give them two. So they have very similar upgrades, except for this augmented bolt, which I'm trying to make each Battle Brothers faction have their own special ability. So I give them augmented bolts. But the other thing that I'm doing is on their leader units, unlike their brothers who only get one upgrade, I'm actually giving them two. I think this could actually make Battle Brothers have their own unique playstyle where their leaders are a lot more important to the army, right? Where they're actually casting two upgrades a turn. I think that's a really cool idea. One of the things is to note here, and I did this as well for the assault squads, I actually added AP1 to their NEG clause. I think that you're going to see this as well in the assault units. These are Space Marines. I mean, these are battle brothers. These are supposed to be people who are these super strong, powerful. And whether it's the reality, I think that they should have AP1 on their energy clause, and the fact that I think a lot of 40K players are going to be wanting to see these guys hit a little harder than AP nothing. I actually added AP1 on their energy clause and on some of their hand weapons as well. But that's a tweak to me. I think that Battle Brothers need actually a little more AP on their energy clause. I did also give them the veteran infantry upgrade. I think that's fine. I've allowed him to have a shield wall, in which we're going to get into this as well. This is the destroyer, so they can have a storm rifle. That's fine. But the other thing I actually added on destroyers was what I'm calling a storm shotgun, which is a short-ranged shooting weapon that doesn't cost that the price isn't just so prohibitive as a storm rifle. One of the things that, and I did this primarily because there's a lot of 40K players who have Terminators that are armed with like a power fist and a rifle. Well, the truth is that in OPR, that storm rifle power fist combo is just so expensive that I would hate for these players not to be able to play their models competitively. So one of the things that I thought about tweaking for those players is, hey, bring your Terminators with this Storm Bolter and Power Fist, but just call it a Storm Shotgun with an Energy Fist. It sort of makes the unit a little more efficient. And also, I split up the ambush. So now ambush isn't automatically included on destroyers. It's something that you can buy. So you can actually play these destroyers a lot more differently. You can actually play them with the storm rifles and just not give them ambush, or you can give them storm shotgun and give them ambush, let them appear, walk up, shoot some things, or charge things. I did as well. We're going to get into this as well for the destroyers. I actually broke up the energy hammer is now part of an energy fist, and there's good reason to that. I'm going to get into this when I talk about destroyers. I have a lot of good reasons actually about actually just making the thunder hammer actually just AP4. And I have an energy maul that I'm calling this as well. I'll get into that when I talk about destroyers here. But this is some of the tweaks that I've made. One, I want it to feel more competitive. And two, I want these units to feel similar to their 40K Space Marine equivalents. The Master Brother is very similar. He just has some of the upgrades that are very similar to the original pack. I didn't change anything. One thing I did change in here is the Chain Fist on all across this army. I actually gave the Chain Fist an AP of 3 now. I think the Chain Fist at AP2, Deadly 3 is just a pretty useless weapon. So I think that AP3 on the Chain Fist for a little extra points is just worth it. I think it's just, I don't like having options in an army like a Chain Fist, which is an AP2 Deadly, especially on a Space Marine or a Battle Brother. It feels like a useless upgrade. But these are similar changes with a jump pack and a combat bike, right? So we'll get into that into a second here. All right. The last of the hero. So again, the mage are the same. One has the destroyer armor, one is a pistol, but they both basically have these limited upgrades so they don't get the two upgrades, right? They don't get they're very, and I like this idea about making mages, casters, their own units to stop maybe some jankiness going on. The other thing is I do have an elite Pathfinder, but one thing you're going to notice is the Pathfinder doesn't have access to some of the upgrades of the Master Destroyer. If you look at a lot of the Battle Brother changes right now, they're sort of the same upgrades on all characters. And I did want to provide some differentiation. So with the Elite Pathfinder, They really only get access to advanced tactics. They don't get access to some of the other uh, powerful abilities that really is reserved just for a master. I did go ahead and add in some other upgrades as well for the Elite Pathfinder. Again, making that Pathfinder its own unit as well. All right, so let's get into the unit. So the Pathfinders are very similar, actually. I didn't change a lot with them. Maybe a few minor things, just giving them the ability to upgrade all models with Scout and stuff. Not a big deal. Battle Brothers. So for Battle Brothers, again, something that's very similar here. Not a lot of changes happen in the Battle Brothers. Here and there, you can go check. I'll post the army in the description. You can look at it. Let's get into the Assault Brothers. Assault Brothers is one of the biggest deviations that I've made from what OPR has done. And there's several things. There's two big changes that I made for Assault Brothers. One, I don't think Assault Brothers are very good. They, in OPR right now, Assault Brothers, I think, are pretty bad. And it's for two things. One, they don't have an AP on their weapon. And to me, that just goes against, I mean, if you're coming from 40K, you are used to that quintessential, I call it a chain, well, heavy hand weapon or a chain blade or chain sword. You're used to that AP1 weapon. This is a Space Marine or it's a Battle Brother. They should be hitting decently hard. And in the basic Battle Brother book, AP nothing, it just doesn't feel right for them. The other thing is just their prohibitive pistol tax. The 12-inch range AP1 heavy pistol. This unit is just very pricey with those pistols. One of the things that with 3.2, we did get this limited rule. And this limited rule, this is a little gamey, but I go back to it. I want people who are watching this who may think that, well, that's sort of gamey to add a limited on these assault pistols, right? But I am doing this specifically for competitive armies, and I feel that the 12-inch heavy pistol is just too expensive and too high of a pistol tax to make these units viable. So I want people to be able to play these Assault Brothers and play them efficiently. So what I have done as a way to counter that pistol tax is to make it 9 inches. So it's not as good as a normal pistol and make it limited. Now, there is some flexibility here. They still can shoot their weapon and they still can model it as a chain sword and pistol, but again, 130 points is now they're doing their purpose a lot better now. Well, but they're still paying some points for their assault pistols, but they're also limited as well. They've only got that one shot and it's still just 9 inches. So that's a big change for me, but I feel that Assault Brothers are now a competitively viable unit now. Yeah, I mean, the upgrades are pretty similar, jump packs. I mean, this is very similar to the existing ones, but this is one of my big changes that I've made in this army is that I'll be working on other Battle Brothers factions, but this is a change that I'll be keeping for all Assault Brothers. I want them heavy weapons to have AP1. That just fits with Battle Brothers. It fits with a Space Marines. The quintessential chain sword should have AP1. And the other thing is that just help for the pistol tax, a 9-inch range with limited is going to make this unit actually competitively viable as well. All right, so the Assault Brothers are one of the big changes. Let's go into the Destroyers. This is one of my biggest changes that I've made. Destroyers in their current version are problematic. One of the things is that they don't have easy access to AP4. And that's because in the current version of Battle Brothers, they treat a hammer as a blast weapon. Um, I'm going to talk about one from a competitive standpoint that doesn't work very well. They already have an option, which is an anti-infantry option with their lightning claws. For them to switch to a hammer with a blast weapon is just another anti-infantry option. And for them to actually get their AP4, they actually have to buy a storm rifle. So it makes getting AP4 on destroyers very difficult. And I think that is something that I think just, should be avoided. So how do we avoid it? So one, I go back to it. I think that a lot of Battle Brothers, they should have, and again, as a 40K player who plays Space Marines, they're going to want to see that AP1 on these dual lightning claws. It makes sense. These guys are Space Marines, they're Battle Brothers, they should have that AP1 on the lightning claws. They get the optional upgrades for ambush. And here I'm doing something different. One, I'm giving them the ability to add a shield wall, which is a shield, and then pick a weapon effectively. They can pick their storm rifle, which is great, or they can again go for this storm shotgun, this 9-inch range, short range. That's just a lot less. As you can see, the point difference here, it's a lot less points to actually just, this is 85 point difference to upgrade these guys with storm shotguns. Now, I think the storm rifle has its place, but it's like the whole thing with that with destroyers, I'm pulling out the ambush so that if you want to give these guys an ambush and drop in with your storm rifles, that's a strategy. You can also not have the ambush and get your storm rifles and sort of use them as a long range shooting unit that you can add a hand-to-hand weapon to or not. So that's those. What I've really done is I want destroyers to be competitively viable. And the way I'm doing so is giving them these three different options here. Now, with the shield wall, giving them a shield, one of the things that I go back to it in 40K, the Thunderhammer was always an anti-armor, anti-monster tool. And for a person who's coming to all of a sudden have their Thunderhammers become an anti-infantry tool, and to not have a way to effectively get AP4 without the Storm Rifle, it's not competitively viable. So I'm just sort of looping in the Thunderhammer and Fist into AP4. It's the same weapon. That means that people who want to bring a Thunderhammer and Storm Shield, it plays the same way. Again, the Chain Fist, we'll get into it. The Chain Fist has an AP3. Let's give people some good upgrades. The Energy Sword's the same. The Energy Maul that they can model it to something else is now the traditional blast weapon. The Storm Rifle still has the same ones. One tweak I did make here is that the minigun actually has an extra AP. A lot of Space Marine players in 40K are going to be used to the quintessential assault cannon, and the current minigun just doesn't have any impact. Like an extra AP one shot. No, I mean we need to have some impact here. So I think as well, I think this heavy minigun, if we think about it in comparison to the assault cannon, needs that extra AP. So the other thing that I'm adding here is I'm making my destroyers, each of the destroyers in these new armies, I want them to have access to quote their chapter special rule. So I'm giving them their chapter banner. I don't want it to be the +1 morale because I think that's useless. So for their chapter banner, it's going to be augmented bolts. For other Battle Brother factions, they'll have a different upgrade, but I'm trying to make that consistent, right? Give this unit their own specialized upgrade. And for this one, I think is augmented bolt, which is +1 AP the next time it shoots. Here, I think now we've got some destroyers that hit hard. They've got several meaningful upgrades. They've actually got different ways that you can play. It actually provides slightly different modeling opportunities. So suppose someone did want to bring some shotguns and storm rifles. That's easily modded. But let's give players. My view is let's give players make a unit competitive and let the players go and model how they want it to. So that's the destroyers. I really like this redesign on the destroyers. Okay, now we need to get into the Space Marine line has additional models that aren't just the OPR. One of the changes that I would really like to see is the Command Brothers, right? So the Space Marines have their command squad. It's a very important part. So I've tried to add this command squad as sort of a specialized specialist unit, but actually have an ability to be very heavy on the special upgrades. So here it's a 3-man squad that you can actually upgrade all 3 models with like an upgrade. And this represents what the command squad is. It's a banner, it's a tactician, and it's a medic, right? So I've got the company medic, which can give a unit regen, advanced tactics, which we know, and the augmented bolts. So this is actually how a command squad feels. Of course, they get access, they can get access to their assault, but we give them some options regarding pistols or rifles or chain blades. I'm actually calling these chain blades, but we give them some upgrades. But one of the things that this command squad really has is this ability to have this 3-man squad running around here giving all these upgrades to everyone. I think that's such a unique. We did make them unique. I did make them unique so that you can't, do anything crazy. But I actually like the command squad. I think it's not only supporting the existing 40K model line, but I think it's actually a pretty good viable unit as well. Now, to be clear, I haven't fully tested these armies. Maybe they do need to get tweaked. Maybe this army needs to get nerfed. And I'm completely open to that. This is my first version of the army. I'm going to be tweaking it as well. Okay, so the next thing let's talk about is the Elite Guard Brothers. These are what we consider to be something like a Stern Guard or something similar. So these, again, are a unique army that they're sort of like, I want each of the Battle Brothers factions to have their own upgrade that's unique. And the Stern Guard are a great example of this, who one, they can just get augmented bolts. So that's their special thing that they can give to others. I think that's a good running thing. They can also get heavy rifles and get, again, one of the things Stern Guard can only get access to heavy bolters, so we only give them one upgrade. And one thing they have here is this rifle drill, which is basically the version of Orc Shooty, which is just, hey, they have exploding sixes. Just something that adds a little more to this Stern Guard unit, makes them a little more pricier, but it's a good competitive unit that provides that flavor. Remember, there are Space Marine players that have Stern Guard models, and like, let's give them a unit that feels like that unit. So this is their Elite Guard Brothers unit that I like. The other thing is that they have the Space Marines do have their I forgot their swords, Bladesworn, the Bladesworn brothers. So this is just adding them, right? Where they have these heavy assault pistols, they've got these energy swords standard, and they've also got this protected, which is I think representing their refractor fields. I think that in 40K they have an invulnerable save, so we're just giving them the protected and also. So again, one of the things I like is making these units unique so that you can't spam them, right? You know, you still want a Battle Brothers army to have a lot of assault destroyers, but you do have a few units that you can add as elites. So the Sword Brothers again just have the protected as well and just come stock with their energy swords. Okay. The last thing is that servitors for the 10th edition codex, these are in the Space Marine Army list. Space Marines, so not only are we providing the Space Marines, the Battle Brothers, with a one-to-one relationship with their 40K equivalent, it's also actually providing a nice chaff unit to the Battle Brothers army, which is a 3-man unit of mechanical servants. So 55 points is pretty cheap. I actually added them on robot. I don't mind mixing and matching. You know, I don't agree with this idea that for an army, everyone is supposed to have a special rule. I think that where it's necessary, mix and match some rules. These servitors are robots, make them the robot special rule. And then give them access to some simple weapons, but also this is, really primarily a chaff unit that I think works. So let's get into the last thing I want to cover is the APCs. So APCs, I think in general are too expensive. So one of the things that I've done is I've tried to trim down some of the cost on the APC, get it below 200 points. One of the things I have is this Impact 3 on the, so I've reduced it from Impact 6. I think that helps out some of the points. I've also given it an option to have a Storm Shotgun. This is going to reduce the points down to 155, which is actually feeling a little better for an APC. I actually allow them to allow someone to upgrade to Impact 6 if they really want it. The Hunter Killer, the Strider, these are all standard upgrades. I did add a smoke launcher for stealth. I think that's a nice little one. And actually, I gave the ability to add an extra shotgun or a storm rifle. So just this APC is now is a lot more flexible. You can actually add some firepower to it, increases the points, or you can go really cheap on this thing down to 155. That's actually feeling like an APC that's actually it's actually usable now. So yeah, I hope that sort of helps. So I'm going to post the link in the description. So this is some of the things, and I again want to say very clear, I'm still working on tweaking this army. This is my first draft on it, but I hope you sort of see where I think, well, what sort of needs to be done to make a Battle Brothers army, one, fun, two, competitive, and three, really inviting for 40K players to come in here and to play with. All right, so with that, we're just going to cover some of the things that I proposed. So some of my fixes is for basic Battle Brothers. This is just a redesign. Again, I proposed really destroyers need a real complete redesign. AP1 and the limited for the Assault Brothers, I think is very needed. The other thing in this redesign that I did is I really made a point to make them unique and I wanted to upgrade them to support their 40K roster. All right, thanks everyone for watching. I'd love to get feedback. Just keep in mind, I actually love to get feedback on this army. This army that I'm working on for the redesigns isn't complete, but it's something that I want to continue to tweak on. So love to get some comments, like, subscribe, and comment as well. If you're in Austin, you can always join the Austin Alternative Gaming Freaks. Thank you guys so much.